So, without further ado, I would like to turn it over to Gina and welcome welcome Gina to being in this space. Thank you for coming. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day and sharing with us the work you've been doing around urban forests and helping us take learning outside.
Thank you. And can everybody hear me okay? All right. I'm going to share my screen and I need to figure out which one to show entire screen, correct? And then I'll share the presentation. Whoops, I'm covering up my toolbar. Sorry, I'm used to working with multiple screens, but I'm traveling at the Wisconsin Society of Science Teachers Conference. So I'm in a little hotel room right now to do this. But once it gets going, then we should be good to go. So slideshow from beginning. So if somebody can give me a thumbs up if you can see my slideshow, perfect. Okay, so we'll dive right in. We're going to look at digging into school sites. We're going to focus primarily on the school sites at your building location, but there will be some extensions to school forests as well that you can make, at least through the links if we don't have time to talk about them during the presentation today. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that the Wisconsin Center for Environmental Ed, which is where the LEAF program is housed, is on the University of Wisconsin Stevens Point campus, and that we are on the ancestral and contemporary lands of the Menominee and Ho-Chunk people. And we acknowledge and honor that they have worked to sustain these places for many generations and continue to do that work. And we also just acknowledge that they were pioneers in the field of sustainability and it's specifically related to leaf in a sustainable forestry. And the Menominee are worldwide examples of how you can use and manage a forest with those 7 generations in mind. So we want to make sure we acknowledge that. The Wisconsin Center for Environmental Education, if you're not familiar with it, was created in 1990 as a way to just encourage people to make sustainable choices for their human and natural communities. And our goal is to provide leadership in that area. And the LEAF program is part of that. It's a partnership between the Center for Environmental Ed, which is in the College of Natural Resources at Point, and then the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. Primarily, we work with the Division of Forestry, but occasionally have some other partners in that. And if you look at the map here, these are locations. This map has not been updated too recently, but it does give an idea that even though we're housed at UWSP, we're a statewide program. And so the school forest dots are the green ones all over. So there's school forests all throughout the state. I think we're the largest school forest program in the country, and we're coming up on our 100-year anniversary in a few years. So we'll be celebrating that and inviting people to join us in that celebration. But then we also work with Project Learning Tree, and so you'll see the difference between the blue and the red dots. So the blue ones would be leaf work that we do, and then PLT work that if you've partnered with us with PLT at all, you probably know Nicole Filizetti. Those locations are in the red. And so we're willing to travel to you. We're willing to have you come to the locations we present, but we really want to help educators understand the forests, both rural and urban in Wisconsin, and how we can use those to extend learning. And what we do when we work with schools is we want that learning to be not just about the forests, but also in the forests. And we try to do that by reaching out to educators so that they feel knowledgeable and comfortable and confident bringing their students into those settings to learn. And so we have professional development, but then also resources, which are lessons, activities, and then even materials, equipment, things that you can check out to use from us. And so today's focus, we're really going to talk about that school site at your location and urban forests. So we'll start with just kind of the definition of an urban forest and then go through some of the benefits of urban forests just in general, but then also benefits of them to education, and then zero in on how you can use that urban forest. What are some of the resources that we have and that we also just know about and want to share with you? And then, that idea that you can extend what you learn in the urban forest to those rural forests in your school forest location, community, county, or if you happen to have a state forest nearby. So we'll start out first with the first question, what is an urban forest? And if any of you want to just unmute and share your ideas or thoughts on what an urban forest is, that would be great. I didn't, with traveling and having only one screen, I didn't work on focusing on making any other polls or things because I just wasn't sure if I could manage it all in that. So I'm just going to count on people to type things in the chat and unmute to share ideas as they can.
I'll share. When I think of an urban forest, I think of things like maybe a park or even just a little set aside corner with land, of land that they have green space. It's kind of
Integration.
Mm-hmm. Any other ideas?
Hi, I'm Sandy, and I think of the entirety of many cities. If you take a Google Earth view over many towns, you won't even see the homes that it's so forested with the street trees and what's in people's yards.
Yeah, anybody else want to share any ideas? All right, so then, yeah, and that's it. That's exactly correct. Before we really dive into the definition, I do want to ask people to think about all the things, living and non-living, that are part of an urban forest. And for this one, so that we don't talk over each other, if you want to just jot those down in the chat, that would be great. And I'm going to see if I can open that up a little bit so I can see as people respond. So what are things that are in an urban forest? So I'll start with the obvious and just type in trees. Oh, somebody else had put that one too. And animals, birds of many types, people, bugs, not so many right now, but yes, buildings. And a lot of times people forget about the buildings and the non-living things that we interact with, the bushes, hedges, streets, trails for hiking, even like your storm systems, water, plants, flowers. So yeah, everything living, non-living, the autos that are in there. And it's a good question to bring up with students because a lot of times they don't think about things that are in an urban forest that you don't often see as part of the rural forests. So thank you for sharing those. And just for the definition is, the urban forest is an entire ecosystem of trees, vegetations, everything that you find in around a town, a village, or a city. So the size can be quite large. If you look, there's a picture of Madison there. And so Madison is a very large urban forest. And some areas you would have homes that you can hardly see because there's such a tree canopy. And other areas, as you get closer to the capital, the urban forest is much more sparse with trees that maybe don't grow out of grass, but just grow out of that little place within the sidewalk that they're given to grow and live and thrive. But all of that is part of the urban forest in addition to the cycling of matter between those living and non-living components of the urban forest. And so before we dive into lessons and activities that we can do within the urban forest, I do want to just give you time to share what benefits first for just communities that urban forests provide. So who can think of a benefit of having urban forests or of urban forests in your community? And you can just unmute and share those thoughts.
Animal watching.
I was going to say shade.
So shade, animal watching.
I think about the peacefulness that the urban forest perhaps might bring, even though it maybe isn't as peaceful as being out in the country with it, but it's still the trees and the animals and just being able to sit and maybe just kind of relax in it would be nice.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like the mental health aspect of being in even when there's concrete, when it's offset by those green spaces within it can be much better. Yeah.
And in-
And then oh, yes.
I was going to say in the chat, we have lower crime rates, and I was going to add in higher property values. We also have
Yes.
better health, physical and mental in the chat, which you mentioned.
Okay. And somehow I closed out my chat and I don't see how to get it back on. So I'm going to count on you, Victoria, to help monitor the chat. Thank you. Yeah, so all of those are benefits of the urban forest for the community. What benefits do you think they provide to education? So if people want to just unmute and share thoughts about that, but specifically to learning.
I think just by seeing the different living things that are around you, that maybe make not only children, but adults curious and want to know more about it. I think it stimulate, I think they, along with feeling better outside when they're there, it helps them to learn better. And I think it has a lot of advantages.
Anybody else have ideas they want to share? Okay.
Can I
Oh,
share one,
yep.
Gina?
Yes.
One thing is just this idea that it helps students understand that nature is everywhere and nature isn't far away, that it's right where we live, right where we are.
Yes, and I think that's one of the most important ones is sometimes kids don't feel like they have that connection to those green spaces in nature, and you just have to remind them that it is all around them anywhere they go. And that. So this next slide here is kind of divided into two, and the overall urban or benefits of urban forests as taken from the DNR website. So they're our sponsor. So I like to default to them for the ideas. And the ones that they have highlighted on their main page is that they help conserve energy. They improve our air quality. They're good for economic vitality. So that would be those increasing your property values and things like that. They reduce stormwater runoff. They enhance beauty. And so I can't remember who it was, but just said like just that feeling good about being outdoors and taking things in. So that would be covered by that. And then also the idea that they sequester carbon. And so lots of different benefits to the community for having urban forests, but then also the educational benefits. And I think we touched on many of these. For sure, we touched on the improvement of mental and physical health. There is research, and if you look on the LEAF website, I don't know if we've cited the most recent research, but there are links to studies that show about academic improvement when you're learning out about nature and how that can help. But then the bottom ones I think are great because they help students develop that sense of place. And you can find and be proud of that environment that you're a part of and realize that you interact with and feel more connected to that and within your community. They're great locations for engaging in inquiry. You can ask a lot of questions and let students explore and be the scientists in their settings. And then just that idea of exploring, systems and relationships. So because they still have all the same cycles of matter happening that would happen in the rural forest, you can do a lot of different lessons related to that. And so I don't know that any one benefit is better than any other, but all together, they just provide a wealth of opportunity for both your community and your school setting. And so we're going to dive in next then to how to use your urban forest or your school site. And we'll start with just general things that you can do outdoors for any type of education. And then we'll dive specifically more into those forestry topics. And so just first question, if you want to type numbers in the chat about how frequently do you use your outdoor school site for learning? And you can do it either as times per week or times per month or times per year, whatever works the best for you. And I just saw my toolbar showed my chat again. So not enough. I think a lot of people would feel the same way. And it looks like people are responding to Victoria's comment like that. I agree. And I don't get out and teach very frequently, but even for me, like my own benefit getting out to do my own thinking outdoors, I don't do enough. And I think sometimes that's where my best thoughts are. So we have daily, for summer school in June, and at a minimum 1 hour a week. And I think it would be, lofty goals for us to have to increase the amount of outdoor learning that we're able to do. And hopefully some of the things we talk about today will help you be able to do that more, or at least just keep that thought in your mind that it's something to work towards. And then the next, if you want to unmute and share some of the types of learning that you do with students to engage outdoors.
Sometimes I used to take my leadership students out to do team building activities. And then I would ask them for feedback when we came back in as far as just how they felt about going outside. And it always encouraged me to keep doing it because they talked about how they were less likely to get disengaged, or how it was nice to have a change of scenery, and it just was really encouraging. We would also go outside with other classes, like maybe a history class or something. We would do some reading outside, sometimes together or sometimes by themselves. They would pick a tree and sit underneath it, and we didn't have an outdoor classroom, but we would just sit out in the green space outside of our classroom windows, and they would read out there, and that worked very nice.
Mm-hmm.
Another comment in the chat is doing scavenger hunts, reading and journaling time. And then another person said, we don't engage in outdoor learning because our outdoor learning classroom area is for looking at. So we'll have to figure out how to change that for you.
Yes,
Our-
yes, that would be good.
Our art teacher takes students outside and to sketch and to look at things. It's just for drawing outside, which is nice.
Yeah, and I've been at the center. I guess I didn't really introduce myself in my position or role, but I've been at the center for almost 4 years now. But prior to that, I was a classroom teacher. In the most recent 10 years prior, it was at a middle school. And while I did like bringing kids outdoors to engage them in learning outdoors, sometimes I brought them outdoors so that they could engage better when we returned indoors. So some learning that just needed to take place indoors, but you knew they had to be in the right mindset, and that, going out for a quick walk and letting them take in nature might just mentally help them feel better, feel more relaxed, and then be able to engage better in the classroom inside. And I feel like especially during COVID that year was stressful for students. And the more that we could take those breaks and just, breathe in the fresh air, the better everybody did. And so sometimes engaging students in outdoors, while that might be everybody's most preferred way, even if you can just get kids outdoors and then bring them back in for the learning, it still can be a benefit to the students and to you, because I do think behaviors also improve when you have that time. All right, and it looks like we had something here about nature school. So spend all your time outdoors in the early years as much, anything you can do indoors can be brought outdoors. And then, Sandy too pointing out that almost all the NGSS standards and the ELS standards and AIG standards and many other content areas can be taught outdoors. And I would echo all of that. And I think if you prepare students in advance so they know you're going outdoors regularly too, you overcome some of those initial barriers about, oh, what if my students aren't prepared and don't have the right clothes on or the right types of shoes or boots, to be outdoors. And I think you sometimes struggle with that initially, but once students get used to the idea that you're going to be going outdoors, they're excited about it. And so, hopefully they'll tend to come in. And I know we always had a great staff of bringing in hand-me-down things. So there were things outside the office that you could borrow for students too, if they needed the appropriate wear for the weather. So taking a look at some easy ways just to use your urban forest as a site. as was pointed out in the chat already, bringing whatever you're learning into the classroom outdoors and just changing that setting to do the same exact learning. Another thing is to just use outdoor materials for it. So like I think of elementary students when they're learning to count and the different manipulatives that they use in the math classroom with the blocks and the cubes. You know, if you can go outside and use acorns or leaves and do some counting and adding, you know, and different math type of activities there. When you get into, you know, the high school level, some people think it might be different, but if you look at, especially in forestry, there's a lot of geometry in nature and measurement and things that can take place like that. And then, you know, as I had mentioned too, just taking those breaks. I heard the term tree recess the other day for the first time, and I had never heard that before. And a teacher was saying that they don't really have many trees on their campus, but they're across the road from a forest, not a forest, a fire department. And the fire department has a lot of trees on their property. And so they just, you know, made an agreement that occasionally they could bring kids over for a tree recess so that they could play the games that they like to play if they are, you know, outdoors and in the trees versus just in the blacktop setting. And then, you know, just a walk and talk, taking them outside to walk around and have, you can give them directions for conversations or just let them have their own general conversations, snack breaks, and breathing, relaxation, yoga, anything like that with it. So lots of different ways to just do the learning you're normally doing, but in that different setting. And Leaf has, and I will share link to the presentation so you have this, but Leaf has some resources if you're interested in learning more about resources or different things that you can do with it. But the Step Outside website has specific activities that aren't necessarily forestry lessons. And then there's a Step Outside on-demand training if you or anyone you know is a little hesitant about going outdoors and want some extra guidance on how to prepare and feel more prepared for doing that. You're welcome to register and do that. And then we also have the school grounds lessons as well. So those are all resources that you can link to. Whoops, there. But now diving in a little more to looking at the actual school forest as the training or as your curriculum and your resource. And so one of the things that we want to start with is looking at all those areas that the DNR defined as the benefits of the school forest and how can we learn about those. And so thinking about this, and I realize we're at about 20 to 25 minutes already. So I'm going to maybe skip over some of the sharing for some of these if they're a little more challenging, but starting with this, I think everybody maybe has ideas on how you use or how urban forests help conserve energy. So if you want to unmute and share your thoughts or even type in the chat how an urban forest helps conserve energy. And I think somebody earlier had said something about shade. And
Sure. So, yep, I said about shade, so it keeps the ground cooler. So whether it's people can come outside and be cool if they don't have air conditioning, so that conserves the air conditioning kind of energy use.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, and then the opposite of that is true too. If it's shading parts of the building, those won't heat up as fast and they might keep the buildings cooler. And so they're a great resource for conserving energy. And some ideas on how you can use your school site to show that would be actually using infrared thermometers. And most of the tools that I'm talking about, we have kits and resources at the Center for Environmental Ed that you can check out free of charge so that you could do that. So we have, right now we have energy kits, but we have received some funding through an urban grant recently. So we'll be making some forestry kits that also have the infrared thermometers so that you can measure. In this case, you're looking at how they help you conserve energy in your building. So you can measure temperatures at different places in the building and look at areas that are in shade and areas that are not shaded. A lot of times, these big, beautiful buildings use daylight windows, but you can also tell that some of those rooms heat up faster if you don't, control the amount of sunlight that's filtering in and that. And so you can look at that. You can also use wind meters to measure wind speeds in areas outdoors that don't have trees and that do have trees, because that would be related to heating. So the windier that it is near the building, the chances of it being drafty and maybe being colder and having to up the level of heat that you're producing can be there. And so just some simple ways where you can talk about that conservation of energy and ways that we can reduce our carbon footprint. And that taking a look at the next DNR benefit that they highlight about urban forests is how can you use your school site to examine how urban forests benefit the economy. And this one might be a little trickier to think about, but does anybody have any thoughts on that? On how they improve the economic vitality of a community?
I'm just thinking it's more inviting to come to a place. And so if it's in a Center Park in the community, people are coming and then maybe spending time downtown, going to the shops and going to the restaurants and that type of thing. So it's more inviting and you come and relax. You could eat your lunch outside, that type of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And at the same time, then your buildings, your areas around them are also more valuable. They're worth more. They will sell for higher values on the market, so they impact the economy that way. One way that a lot of people don't think about urban forests that I'm going to highlight in our little lesson here, and you don't need to read through all of this, but I wanted to make sure you have the links if you want to look at anything later. But urban forests have become a great resource for forest products as well. So it used to be that all lumber was milled in, sawmills, and you had to take the lumber somewhere else to use it. And if it came from an urban area and somebody had at one point pounded a sign into it, so there was a nail in it, it would shut down the operation of the sawmill because, the blade might break or something might happen. And so nobody wanted to use urban wood to make products from. And so with the increased popularity of portable sawmills that people can run from their homes, or we have a lot of schools actually, even in Wisconsin, that have a portable sawmill in their tech ed facilities. People are able to work at a much smaller scale, and they can replace those blades cheaper and easier. And so now when you see some of the trees that fall or that have to be trimmed down or taken down because of disease, you can actually use that urban wood for things. And you find that families who grow trees and have trees in their yard that eventually may need to come down want to have something, to cherish that tree from, because it's been a part of their family and they've had swings in it and tree houses in it. And so urban wood has actually become a popular thing to make forest products from, and a lot of times decorative and art pieces, but sometimes it's definitely utilitarian pieces too. And so on this slide, I have some links to a couple little quick videos that highlight the use of urban wood for products. And then an activity that you can do after that is to go out, use the urban tree key that LEAF has, and you can find from our website and some of the LEAF Tree ID tools to identify what are those trees that grow around your school and what are some things that those could be used for when a tree comes to the end of its life cycle, or as we are seeing a little bit with the climate impacts of some trees being damaged or broken in half, and all of a sudden you have this large amount of wood there that you can use for a purpose, whether it's something for you individually or something that's sold. But there's even a school, I believe, Prentice, who has made a partnership within their community that they get wood from trees that are damaged in storms, and then they use that in their wood shop, and it reduces the cost that students have to pay for the wood that they're using to learn from. And then they also sell the products when they're done with them, and so they're able to fund some things in their school building as well using that portable sawmill. So it's definitely has some economic benefits that nobody ever really thinks about. They always think of wood products as coming from those state forests or private forests that are in those rural areas. Another benefit is with air quality. And we do have some of the Climate Fellow partners and the Climate Hub partners that definitely talk about some of the indoor air quality and outdoor air quality and have great resources. And that, so if anybody wants to share any ideas on this, right, whoops, I accidentally clicked ahead right now. I invite you and welcome you to take a moment to do so before I share a few thoughts that I have. Whoops. Keep scrolling.
I think people are being shy, Gina.
I guess. Okay. Well, that's all right. I do encourage you, though, to go and look on the Wisconsin Climate Education Hub because there are some great air quality related resources there. And there's some good work happening in the Milwaukee Public Schools related to that. But when you look at the air quality index, talking about your outdoor air quality, trees and especially urban trees are great at removing pollution from the atmosphere. And so LEAF has in a lot of our kits what's called DBH tapes. And it's a tape measure that when you wrap around the tree, instead of telling you what the circumference is, it has the mathematical equation built right into the tape measure and it tells you its diameter. And you can use that diameter and this app, which is free online, My Tree. You don't have to download anything. You just go in, you put a location of a tree and it asks you what the diameter of the tree is and a couple other questions. And then it will show you the actual amount of pollution that's eliminated from that tree. And it'll do like an instant one, so like, you know, within that year, but then also like a 20-year projection. And it's a great way to show the benefit for that. So if you look at the one on the slide there, it's talking about carbon monoxide, ozone, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, in everything. So you can get those quantifications. You can also click on it and it will do equivalents. So it's like it will remove as much pollution as from this. And so it gives you specific examples and tangible ideas that students that can use for that. And I see Sandy said something about students once placed expanding DBH tapes on local trees to measure growth from year to year and then calculate the increase in those benefits. So that's fantastic. And that's a great way to incorporate some mathematics, you know, into it too, looking at that change over time. And it'd be wonderful, you know, depending on where you're located to, you know, just be able to chart that and share even, you know, data from one class year to the next class year where kids feel like they're part of that accumulation of data over time as well. And similar to with air quality, if we take a look at the next question, it's like, how do you use it to investigate how urban forests reduce stormwater runoff? And the Center for Environmental Ed has some non-forestry kits related to measuring how quickly water is flowing over impervious surfaces versus ones that are able to be absorbed water and things like that, which is great. But we also can take and use that same tool with the DBH tape, and it will talk about the stormwater mitigation, how much water is avoiding going, you know, right into the sewer system or avoiding going across the land and eroding more soil before it enters your rivers and lakes in that too. And so very similar way to do that. And these ideas I'm presenting here are all some quick ones that you can do. I will show some links to some LEAF resources that we've developed, but then ones that we're also in the process of developing that will dive deeper into each of these areas as well. But just wanted to get some initial ideas, you know, for starting those investigations. And then the other one that is related to My Tree is how your school grounds can show how urban forests sequester carbon. So how they store carbon dioxide. And you can use those same tools, looking at the DBH tapes, measuring the diameter and getting the carbon equivalents of trees. And so the carbon one is my favorite because it will tell you like how many cars or miles driven are avoided by having those trees. And so it's a definite way that you can show that. And En-ROADS, and I believe if I click this link, it should, are you able to see the En-ROADS app now? Okay. And so En-ROADS is a great tool when you're looking at climate, and LEAF and KEEP, our other program at the Center for Environmental Ed, really want to expand what we do with climate education. And so En-ROADS is one of those tools that's great for it. It works the best for KEEP because there's a lot of things related to energy that you can change and toggle things on to show the impact on the increase in temperature over time. But if you look towards the bottom of the En-ROADS app, there's deforestation. And so when we're talking about deforestation in this realm here, it's not talking about when you're harvesting wood to use in a managed forest where you're replanting as you take, but this is more when you're clear cutting the forest and that land is not used for forests anymore. And so you look at if you decrease the amount of deforestation so that you are, if you start, and I should have told you, you want to look at, let me start over. You want to look at the numbers of the degrees in Celsius or Fahrenheit that the temperature increases. And so if you increase deforestation, move to the right, it's increasing that temperature. But if you work to decrease deforestation, so you don't cut down as many of those trees, you don't, let me scroll it over all the way to the edge. You plant more trees and stuff, you can definitely see there's differences in the temperature change and that. And so it's the tool right now, I think from like looking at the urban forest, it doesn't capture quite as much because we're not looking at, when we look at avoiding deforestation, we're not talking about what can we do in our urban forest by planting more trees and getting the benefits of those. And so it just something I wanted to make you aware of, not necessarily related to the urban forest as much, but if you're looking at energy efficiency. So if we have trees in our urban forest and it makes our buildings use less energy, then it's really an energy efficiency thing. And so if you say, I'm going to improve my energy efficiency, you can see how quickly that number, like we took deforestation all the way backwards, and or like when we changed from the dot here, it didn't go much more than 0.1 in either direction. But when we look at that energy efficiency, if we improve that even just a little, we're already making a much larger change in the projected temperatures. And so looking at that idea of that the urban forest can help us with our energy efficiency is definitely something that can have an impact on climate and climate change in the future. And then the last example that the DNR had was just the idea of that urban forest enhanced beauty. How do you get that with your school site? And this is where I think it's great in almost any content area, just that idea that when you're in that beautiful setting, you feel more relaxed, you feel better. And so, you can go outside and record observations about that. What are areas that are most visually appealing? Where do they feel the most relaxed? Or just use that space to help generate creativity if you're working on art projects or writing projects or different things like that. And so those are some of the ways that, LEAF has come up with to help encourage educators and students to understand those values of urban forests to them. One of my particular favorites that the DNR doesn't include on their page because they have a whole entire page just for urban forests and climate is this idea of how do urban forests mitigate the impacts of heat islands at your school. And I think a lot of people, when they hear of heat islands, they think about things like in this picture. So these tall buildings that in some of them don't have any green space around them and they heat up really fast. And it's definitely a larger scale problem in a place like Milwaukee or Madison that has a lot more of that urban concrete area. But if you go out in a rural school that's in a smaller community, you definitely have places on your school grounds that are hotter or colder than others and places that are more comfortable to be in. So, anybody think about when you go outside, where do you feel hottest, outdoors, like at a recess time? And you can just unmute and share. Or you can type it in the chat too.
On the south side of the building.
Okay, so the south side of the building. What are some of the features at the south side? Is it just the location, or is there like
from the brick of the building, if it's really heating up and no trees on that side, so you're getting that sunlight, direct sunlight warming up the ground and the building.
Okay, so it's the direct sunlight, but then it's also that the building is made up of brick, and so that warms up and radiates from there. Other spaces that people feel like it's warmest when they're outdoors.
For us, it's, again, the south side is true, but also, where there's concrete, it's just, it's just hot.
Yeah, so I taught the last 10 years that I was teaching in a K-8 building. And the elementary students had the playground grassy area when they were outside for recess. And when the middle school students went outside at their lunch for their recess, they only got to be on the parking lot because that was the only space that was left. And it was a definite difference in temperature between that parking lot concrete or asphalt space versus the green space that was in the playground or even wood chips, or anything that they had there. And I think you even see that on the different types of playground equipment too. Your wood equipment doesn't heat up the same way that a metal piece of playground equipment would. And so you can easily talk about that idea of heat islands on your school grounds. And again, using those infrared thermometers, asking students to predict where they think cooler areas might be and where warmer areas might be, and then go out and test that and expand into some inquiry lessons that way. And what are the characteristics of those spaces? And, in most cases, they're going to find that those natural spaces are going to be much cooler than the spaces that are built by humans. So looking at that idea that, the more we can increase natural spaces anywhere, whether we're in a typical place that's considered urban, you have an urban forest even in a rural community. But anytime you're increasing that green space and maximizing your urban forest, you have potential there. Oops, and I somehow went backwards in my slide. I'm not very good at using this mouse here. It's a little different than the one in the office. So there's links here, and I had mentioned before, we have updated the 5-8 lessons about urban forestry in our LEAF curriculum, and those can be found online already. We're actually going through one more update of those real quickly before we dive into the 9-12 and the K4 lessons, but they'll all be related to the information that we've recently partnered with the DNR and specifically the Urban Forestry Department on. And then we also have a link in here to the DNR Climate Change and Urban Trees website. And they have great resources that actually show a story map of different communities that you can use too. But we also have, if you look at non-LEAF and then here's the links to those. So those will be included in this. And our goal is to have all of the lessons updated with information and data and statistics that's current by 2026. And so you can look to the website for that. For now, a lot of our lessons talk about what the urban forest is, but they don't engage learners in going outdoors all the time in them. And that's one of the goals of the projects, is to focus on having all those urban forest lessons not just be things to learn about the urban forest, but ways to also learn in the urban forest. And then the second reason we identified the need for them was to link them all to climate connections. So talking about how improving the quality of and the health of our urban forests will also help mitigate climate change. And so those you can look for in the coming year. We do have at LEAF, if you haven't used them before, we have a lot of different forestry kits. The one pictured here is the forest education kit, and the small circle towards the bottom outside of the kit is the DBH tape that you can use to measure the trees, which is a great tool to use if you want to use that iTree app and look at those values of the trees as far as how much pollution they can remove from the air, the carbon dioxide they remove, and the stormwater runoff they avoid. But then there's also other tools related to measuring and compasses in case you want to look at different activities connected to orienteering and things like that. We have kits for different grade levels. We also have a forest health kit if you're interested in looking at invasive species. And I think that's something that people forget, is that your pests like emerald ash borer, they aren't just confined to the rural forests. They can infect trees in all areas. And the conference that I'm at right now is in Oshkosh, and I ran through Menominee Park this morning and saw a number of trees that have recently been cut. And I happened to ask my colleague whose house I was staying at, and she said, oh yeah, those were all ash trees. And so they had to remove the ash trees because they had been infested with emerald ash borer and needed to be removed from there. And so, it's definitely something that students might observe in around in the areas that they're into. So the Forest Health Kit can help kids understand that. And then we have a forest products kit as well that shows, things that can be made from wood, whether it's harvested from an urban or a rural setting, and it can lead to conversations about, how do you manage your forest sustainably so that you can use some of these products that come from wood, but also make sure that you have healthy forests into the future. And so those are all available. They're free for educators to use. We even ship them to your school sites for free if you don't have funding that can be used for that, or if you're within 30 miles of the campus at UWSP, we can just arrange to have you pick them up there. And then a couple online sites that are really cool for learning about the urban forest is the Wisconsin Community Tree Map. That one shows trees that have already been inventoried in different communities throughout Wisconsin. It's a great tool just to look at forest diversity. When we talk about the issue with emerald ash borer and ash trees, not too long ago, we had the same type of issue with elms and Dutch elm disease. And so the Wisconsin Community Tree Map is a really good tool to help you look at forest diversity and help students understand, that to really have a healthy urban forest, you really need to have a lot of different types of trees in it. And so it's a good tool for learning about that. But you can also, if you're really motivated and like the idea of taking your students out to help measure trees, it's a way they can be a part of citizen science, and that you can actually work with the DNR to get the trees in your location added to the community tree map. And so while the majority of them are added by municipalities, there are ways that educators can become trained to input data into that program too. And then the National Explorer Tree Equity Score is a great website that identifies the official areas that are considered urban. So we have urban forests and areas that are not urban, but this one looks at your urban areas, and it will show you the tree equity. So how much of your community there is covered with tree canopy. And you can definitely see the difference in the level of canopy in a community. And in this recent IRA funding that helped with some grants is if you could look and you could show that you didn't have the same level of tree canopy, you qualified for some of the grant programs that would help plant trees. And just an interesting statistic, as I've been working on some of the updates for the Urban Forest Guide, the Wisconsin DNR in their most recent research that they did on urban forests found out that $428 million is the amount of cost savings of urban tree canopies, so that the more urban trees you have, the more money your communities are saving, and it's for reasons like that, stormwater runoff and avoiding that. And so when you look at the issues that we have resulting from changes in climate, a lot of the solutions are urban trees, but they've also already been part of that prevention for the ones that we have in place. And I noticed here, Victoria said something too about urban forestry grants for environmental and outdoor education too. So that's awesome. And then just extending learning to other forests, the slides that follow from here on out just show some of the other resources that we have that maybe aren't applicable to every urban or school setting, but that if you do venture out into other locations are helpful for you to be able to use there. So if you're going to a school forest or a community forest or a state forest, things that you can do with that. And